Hi, and welcome to Total Rewind, a Filmmaker's Compass podcast where we take a look back at movies 30 years and older and see if they still hold up. I'm D-Man, joined by CP, and I'm going to throw it over to you, CP, because you are, of course, dressed appropriately for the movie we're going to be discussing today. And go ahead and explain what is on your t-shirt.
We're going to be watching Ghostbusters from 1984, so I am rocking some authentic Ghostbusters merch here.
It's the original Ghostbusters logo, and it's iconic. It's recognizable. Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things when you look at Ghostbusters, like just diving right in, is its staying power. Like, they've done multiple sequels, they've done a video game, they've done all this different stuff, but really the original movie staying power is immense. It is so popular.
Yeah, no, it's really crazy when you think about it.
So I'm going to go ahead and just say off the top, does this movie hold up? Of course it does. We don't need to wait. You don't need to wait to the end of this one to know that I love Ghostbusters. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. I watch it every Halloween day. That's how I end my night. And I watch it, throughout the year whenever it's on. It was one of those movies that, back when people used to flip through channels on cable, if Ghostbusters came on, I was stopping. That was enough.
On that note, thanks for listening to this episode, everyone. Apparently, we don't need to discuss anything.
No, I mean, Ghostbusters just is one of those movies where, it really holds up in almost every imaginable way. And that is, a true testament to even the effects in the movie, which we'll get to in a little bit. But wow, I mean, it's just a great film. So, first of all, I'll throw it over to you. Culturally speaking, Ghostbusters is everywhere.
I mean, I don't really know if I have anything to add to everything you just said. As you said, there have been 2 Ghostbusters movies, and we're getting ready for a third one to come after the original. There have been at least 2 television series.
Cartoon was amazing. I used to have Ghostbuster sheets.
Action figures, right? It's definitely one of those brands that they took the Ghostbuster logo and plastered it anywhere.
Lunchboxes, backpacks, t-shirts.
Except for Stay Puft Marshmallows. I mean, why did we not get actual Stay Puft Marshmallow Man on a bag of marshmallows? I would still buy those just for,
Yeah, I have to wonder if the people that were responsible for closing that deal just wanted so much money that everybody was like, yeah, no. Because we're just going to stick with our own brand.
I'm not going to lie. I can't name any marshmallow brand except for Stay Puft.
That's the power of Ghostbusters. And here's the other thing, too. You got to remember this. People today, adults today, still dress up as Ghostbusters for Halloween. You could go into almost any Halloween store, any of those spirit stores, whatever they are, and they always have a little section for Ghostbusters. They still sell proton packs
with the backpack and the
yeah. So the proton pack and the trap.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just crazy to me because I'm like, man, I mean, whatever the movie did right, it did so right that it's been able to stay culturally relevant for that long.
I mean, I think something that's really amazing is the character of Slimer, who is such a minuscule part of the Ghostbuster movie, is like the Ghostbuster official mascot, and he's.
I would say Slimer is even more the ghost mascot than the ghost in the logo.
The ghost in the logo, yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, which is crazy, and I know that's part of that is we have to attribute that, I think, to the cartoon that came out slightly after. He was a good guy in the cartoon. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna lie, I watched it, and it was
dude, I'd still watch it if I could find the reruns.
Well, I mean, I was gonna say, as a kid, I loved it, and I think back now, I'm like, was that show even any good? I don't know, but
no idea, man.
Slimer was super popular. I had the action figures. Ghostbusters was pretty sweet. So cultural relevance we cannot move on from that topic until we talk about 2 things: the line, who you going to call, which is the butt of jokes. People have said that line for decades now. There's prank phone calls. There's all this stuff, you know. And of
True.
course, the answer, if anyone ever asks, well, who are you going to call? Even if you mean it, like, oh man, I got to get my car fixed. You're like, who are you going to call? They're like, Ghostbusters. Of course,
True.
you can't.
Very
You
true.
cannot let
Very
that
true.
line slip by without saying it. So, and the second thing is the song, which
True.
also has Halloween playtime every year, so has
Yep.
stayed on active playlists every year, but is also incredibly catchy.
True.
So, and it's funny because I didn't know this, but they had no idea that this song was gonna, you know, blow up like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I guess like they had commissioned this guy to like write a theme song, and I don't even know if they originally intended. I can't. This I don't know, but I'm not sure if they originally intended to use it in that montage sequence in the middle of the movie. But I think the song ended up just being so good, they're like, yeah, put it in the movie. Like they were just using it. You know how like artists write like promotional songs for films, especially back
Yeah.
in the day. It was an opportunity for an artist to get a plug attached to a big movie, and you know, vice versa. But
Huh. Yeah, it is definitely one of the best movie themes. Like, you know,
yeah, it's incredible. And I don't know, yeah, if you've ever seen like when I think it might be in the second movie, but there's also like they dance to it. It's great. Like look that up. Just look it up. It's fantastic. So I mean, in terms of just the impact Ghostbusters has had, you know, think about it this way: the kids in Stranger Things season 2 dressed up as Ghostbusters, and of course they're in the 80s. It's 84 in the movie, but
sure.
I mean, it just doesn't escape us.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. We got the new one coming out in about a month, and we're going to take a look at that. So stay tuned. And as we continue our love fest here, we got to talk a little bit about the effects in the movie and kind of its story structure. So,
Yeah.
as far as the effects go, what's your opinion? Do they hold up?
I mean, it's really weird. I was, you know, as we were getting ready for the episode, was reading that Ghostbusters essentially had the highest effects budget of any comedy ever.
Wow. Okay.
And I think it's really weird because obviously there is so much of the film that is again kind of oozing 80s,
Yeah.
right? With a lot of these 80s movies we watch, part of the fun is getting to, you know, go back to that time. And Ghostbusters does that so well. I think most of the effects hold up really, really well. I think especially kind of the spectral ghost stuff is really good. There's the claymation sequence with like the servants of Gozer
Yeah. The dogs.
they look claymation, and I mean
That was going to be my major gripe. I was like, if there's any shots that really stand out as me, being like that dated poorly. There's a couple shots of the claymation dogs that just don't look good, but it's almost like in comparison to the like puppeteering shots of those same dogs, which look incredible.
yeah, those are good. I mean, there's some shots with all the mat work of the building,
Yeah.
right? I mean, even there's a shot that I was actually really blown away with where they're kind of playing tricks with the camera where you see from ground level the cars and the people of New York running and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man walking into frame.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it looks really good, you know.
And they really do a lot of things. Like there's deep stairwells, there's sides of buildings blown off, there's ghosts flying all over Manhattan, you know, in and out of hot dog vendors, and they have cool actual visual effects or practical effects, like the taxi driver when he turns around, he's all dead.
Yeah.
Like they do a lot so well.
They do everything that you expect from kind of special effects back in the day. It's quite impressive for a comedy.
And I love that they just like the effects are solid, but like Slimer, for instance, that whole sequence where they're chasing him through the hotel, which is so good.
So much fun.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass. I mean, there's just so many good lines.
So many good lines.
But even that sequence, like what's really neat to me is like obviously they're using kind of like an opacity translucent effect for Slimer. And yet, for some reason, I think our minds are tricked because he's a ghost. We don't actually know what he should look like.
True.
Right. And so, as long as they can get the edges to look right, you can't see any like weird fuzziness or anything around the ghost. It really plays off well. And
I was thinking the same thing, especially about the ghost they see in the library in the beginning, the floating
oh, yeah.
woman. Same thing. You're like, okay, I've never seen a ghost, but I imagine it would look something like that if I did.
And the other thing Ghostbusters doesn't shy away from is they make the ghosts kind of grotesque.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't look like monsters, they look like ghosts. Like if you saw that, it would be kind of scary. Like the taxi driver, like you said, the floating apparition at the library at the beginning. Like that would be scary if
yeah,
a ghost was like, raw. I'd be like, oh shit, count me out.
Yeah.
So I thought all that stuff really held up well. And then one of the things I appreciate about the film is if you actually read the story about how they originated the story, I guess it was originally supposed to be like John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, and they were supposed to be like dimension traveling to go catch a ghost.
I did read something, and I think they were supposed to use magic wands.
Yeah, it was going to be like, like Blues Brothers with like ghosts and interdimensional travel and like all this shit. And I think one of the things that helps the movie age really well is they actually ground it in a story about essentially like entrepreneurship.
True.
Which is, it's really just like a couple of guys that are like kind of have a good business idea. Like,
I mean, the villain in the film is the EPA shutting them down. Like,
yeah, right. Like it's bureaucracy, it's governance, right? That's, at the end of the day, Gozer shows
this
up. This
man has no dick.
What a great line. Like, I still laugh at that line because he's like, yes, Your Honor, this man has no dick. And then he's like, that's what I heard. He's like, I don't know for sure. Just so classic. But I think like as far as effects and stuff go, I think one of the biggest pluses the movie does is it grounds the movie in realistic settings, right? They drive a car, not like a spaceship. Mm-hmm. Their proton packs are practical. They fit on their backs. So it looks great. I think one of the great things about the movie is almost everything they do, they have a joke about, right? They pull the, I think Ray pulls the car up to the station and Venkman's like, hey, you can't park that here. And then he's like, oh shit, it's one of our guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when they have the proton packs on, like they're standing in line at the elevator and the guy's like, someone saw a cockroach on 12. And so basically they're just playing it off like they're exterminators, which they are, but for ghosts.
Yeah.
And I think that really helps the movie age well, because if they had done that kind of like interdimensional travel, it might have been, I mean, I know we talked in another episode about like some portals and this and that. They don't play that well. And that movie came out like 3 or 4 years after Ghostbusters.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, aside from the great special effects, I think one of the things that you cannot, we can't talk about this movie without acknowledging the amazing cast.
Oh yeah. All A
comedic geniuses in as the Ghostbusters. The supporting characters are great. I mean, Rick Moranis is hilarious as just the most unlucky human being on the planet.
Yeah, what's his name? Tully? Louis Tully?
Yeah. Hilarious, and probably
even
because
Sigourney Weaver was great.
Yeah, and probably because Ramis and Aykroyd wrote this with their friends in mind, they embody those characters so well, or really those characters embody those actors so well, right? I mean, could anyone other than Harold Ramis,
Egon,
No, no.
I don't think so either. There's just such a subtleness
And you
to that
need the
character.
smart ass sarcasticness of Venkman, that only Bill Murray could bring.
Yeah. Like I love that scene where he's talking to Janine
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, Janine, like call someone. What are we paying you for? And then
Type
she's like,
something.
yeah. And then the phone rings and she's like, Ghostbusters, what do you want?
Yeah.
You know, oh, it's just, it's such a fun movie. And before we get into the story, because like I said, the story is actually like structured really well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to throw this over to you. Talk a little bit about the comedy.
Talk about the comedy. I mean, the comedy is genius. Part of it is, as you said, every scene has multiple layers of jokes. You have these different comedians all delivering in their signature styles. And because of that, you have all these different jokes firing constantly, right? Some of them are physical, some of them are sarcastic, some of them are puns. Like, it's joke after joke after joke, and it doesn't ever feel old because you keep cycling through new styles of comedy in every scene. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and one of the things I think with when it comes to the comedy is they strike this balance that appeals to both kids and then adults. And I would say most of the jokes are actually more adult, but I loved Ghostbusters as a kid. But I remember it was one of those movies that aged really well because I got more and more of the sarcasm and the jokes as I got older.
Exactly.
So I have like almost a new appreciation for the movie. Another movie like that I remember from my childhood was Liar Liar with Jim Carrey. There's a lot of jokes about marriage and sex in that movie that, kind of went
as
right
a kid
by
or
me as a kid.
over your head.
Because it's about a father and son, so it's relatable for a kid. And obviously there's a lot of, humor for kids in that movie. But I remember as I got older and watched it, I was like, oh man, there's like a lot of humor in here that I didn't even understand when I was a kid. And Ghostbusters is kind of that way, where there's so many scenes where there's these subtle little digs or little things, and I'm like, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So even the opening sequence, they're sitting around and he's like, well, not the library sequence, but when he's Venkman's quizzing the guy and the girl,
the students.
Yeah, and he's like flipping cards and having them predict what's on them. Like as a kid, I just always thought it was funny because he's like shocking the guy.
Yeah.
And I thought he's just like, messing with him. But like really, he's like trying to hook up with this girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I was a kid, I wasn't picking up on that. I thought it was just, like a funny gag. He's just messing with this guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, later, you're 9 o'clock. I was just about to say 9 o'clock.
Yeah. But on top of it, they're all very outlandish characters, right? They're eccentric characters, and that makes it entertaining when you're a kid. And when you're an adult, I mean, again, there's endless sources of comedy coming out of their mouth.
Yeah, and as all great comedies, right? Like some of my favorite, love Superbad. Like I said, Liar Liar. When you find great comedies, they are incredibly quotable.
Oh my gosh, this movie is so quotable. There's like a quote for any situation.
Yeah, like Ghostbusters is that thing, He's like, Ray, if anybody asks you if you're a god, you say yes. What are you thinking? Like, never say no to that. And I don't know, even like now, an adult joke, I didn't even know what it was when I was a kid. They're up on the tower or the top of the skyscraper. They're going to fight Gozer, and he's like, it's Miller time.
Yeah.
And that's timely. That was a catchphrase. That was a great marketing phrase, but also like it was a phrase, in reference to like, let's go, let's do this. So, yeah. I mean, it has to be like I said, with all comedies, we looked at Animal House. I mean, really anything, Spaceballs, whatever it is, when it's a great comedy, it's so quotable. And Ghostbusters is that movie.
And the flowers are still standing.
Yeah. I mean, oh, it's just amazing. He slimed me. That's great. See if you can get a sample. He doesn't care. Like, are you okay? Like, you're not dead, right? He's like, no, get a sample.
I collect mold spores and fungi.
And then he like pulls out a candy bar. He's like, Egon, you deserve this.
Oh, so
Yeah,
apparently we could just quote Ghostbusters for 3 hours.
I know. We could just, I mean, I'm sure like we'll make some videos poking fun at Ghostbusters because I mean, it really is that quotable. And that's one of its major strengths. And it's one of the reasons why I think people can watch it again and again. Just like, you know, for instance, me, I can watch Friends over and over, sitcoms. I love them.
Mhm.
But mostly they're just quotable and the jokes never get old because they're so smart and the characters are so funny that, you know, you can't help but laugh. So
yeah.
now let's take a look at the story.
Oh, a lot there. I mean, as you said, one of the strengths of this film is it is a complete story. It's actually grounded in a good story where we test these characters and we push them to, you know, outside their comfort zone. More importantly, for an audience, it's something that we can relate to in the sense that we have all, whether you are a small business person or not, you can deal with the frustration of bureaucracy, which is what they're dealing with.
Yeah, like I love the scene, like you said, like if you're a small business owner having to like wing it where they're like eating Chinese food and he's like, yo, I'm gonna need some cash to take out Miss Barrett. And they're like, this is the last of the petty cash, referring to the Chinese food. And then he's like, he like hits Ray and he's like, hey, chew your food. Like enjoy this Chinese food. Cause I mean, we are so screwed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so
well, I mean, okay. So story-wise, something that I think works really well is they have this parallel between the entrepreneurship, right, and the bureaucracy that runs in tandem with Sigourney Weaver, Miss Barrett, and Gozer. Yeah. And they all pinnacle together. And I really appreciate how the story is building, right? But they're connected.
Yeah.
And to that end, right, like literally, Rick Moranis and Sigourney Weaver's characters end up becoming like Gozer's minions, dogs.
Yeah.
And so even that, I mean, it raises the stakes because you're like, you don't want to kill those dogs. And they even, you know, acknowledge that later where they're like, you know, doesn't Ray say something like, oh, barbecue
so
dog?
It's like barbecue dog.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, Vankman, I'm sorry. Yeah. Like I had no idea, you know, it just came to me. And I don't know, I think the way the story works is it just allows this kind of slow burn for most of the movie where we get to hang out with the characters and they're telling their jokes all the way to where, you know, there's some interdimensional ghost thing that's about ready to, you know, attack New York.
Yeah.
And essentially the world, probably.
Yeah.
And the stakes couldn't be higher. You know, here are the Ghostbusters, like, hey, they start off like, you know, do you hear weird noises in the night? Have you ever seen a spook, specter, or ghost? You know,
yeah.
They're like literally like, you know, most people are like, oh, I have a ghost in my attic. And that's like who they're going after, all the way to like literally saving the world. It's quite remarkable.
True.
So, because you gotta work hard to get us there. Like, you know, all the way from the acknowledgement at the beginning of the film that like, hey, ghosts are real in this world. But again, the world's grounded, right? They're not playing it off as like, this is, you know, common knowledge that ghosts exist. Most people laugh at that, even in this world.
Yeah.
So I just think they do such a good job of taking you from like, okay, right away, we're like, we saw a ghost, we saw it with them. So we know, okay, they're here, all the way to Gozer shows up and you're like, damn.
And you make a good point, right? The movie opens with them going to investigate a ghost that a library where they encounter one to coming back and getting kicked off of campus for their pseudoscience that they're studying, right? So we know very well that they see things that the rest of the world does not, and they are already at odds with society.
Yeah. No, dude, and I love the small business aspect because I love when they're walking out of the bank and he's like, everyone has like 3 mortgages. You're like, oh
man.
He's like, my father gave me that house.
But yeah, and what's great is I think it's kind of interesting, right? When you look at the story arc, at the beginning, we're not really sure how much Venkman buys into this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Early on, it's very much that his impression is this is a way to make a quick buck.
Yeah.
And
oh, yeah.
At the end, he is the one advocating to the mayor to let them step up and handle this because only they can.
That's true. It's
And
a great arc.
We see some growth there, you know?
Yeah, I think all the characters have great arcs. The only one being the constant is probably Ray. Ray and Egon seem to be like, they believed it at the beginning, all the way to the end. But I mean, all the other characters, Winston wants to be a part of the team. He becomes a part of the team. Venkman becomes a believer and also is, trying to save the girl. They have the mayor and, a lot of New Yorkers coming around. The Ghostbusters become celebrities. They're constantly, they have these arcs. Even Sigourney Weaver's character, although it's a massive jump because, can we acknowledge that scene where she sits down in that chair and the arms
and the
grab her?
Oh, dude, that's terrifying.
I was
as a kid, so scared.
Yeah, that creeps me out to this day. And then when she's like floating above the bed.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I was like, yep, this is pretty creepy. Some creepy stuff. But even though like Gozer essentially like takes them over, before that, she's already kind of coming around. Venkman is making an impression on her, even if she doesn't want him to.
Mm-hmm.
So, because think about that, like, even the chemistry between them, at face value, you wouldn't think there's any chemistry, and yet somehow they play it off in a way that works.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So, oh man, I don't know. I'm trying to remember now. I'm like, did I forget any major quotes from Ghostbusters?
I know you forgot a bunch, dude.
I know. We should just read the script.
Like, it's amazing because like I'm watching it and I'm like, why are there not more t-shirts with like this line on it and this quote? And it's just so good. I think
cats and dogs living together.
I think
mass hysteria.
In my mind, I think the two of the most amazing things that they do in the story are, as you said, bringing it back to earlier on, there's 2 distinct moments where they pull in the Ghostbusters song.
Oh yeah.
And I think both of the first one being the montage in the middle of the film where we see the Ghostbusters breaking through, right, in the Atlantic, and everyone is talking about these guys and what they're doing, and we see their rise to fame. Great scene. And part of it is the music. Part of it is because we just watched them having fun. And I feel like this is a movie that if you were on set, I feel like it would have been a lot of fun to just be a part of.
Yeah.
And then obviously at the end, I mean, that I think honestly, the part where the mayor gives them the green light and they get ready to go, it just is, it's just, this is what we wanted to see. These guys going out there to slay ghosts. And when they come down and they're victorious and we're listening to the Ghostbuster music, it's amazing,
Yeah, I have to agree.
And I mean,
montage
what,
is great.
In terms of like Campbell's story structure, like they actually climb the mountain at the end, like 22 flights of stairs.
Like one of the only things that is definitely weird is like the ghost blowjob. Like
it feels so out of place.
Well, even the comedy of it, you're like, I don't know. It feels like you guys went a hair too far in that moment.
Yeah. No, it is weird because it's something every time you watch it, I'm just like, that's odd.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm surprised like test audiences or whatever like weren't like, hey, in this great montage sequence of which I'm sure they had more footage than they used. You could have put anything else there. That's probably one of the only things in the movie that stands out is like every time I see it, I'm like, it's just awkward. It's not funny,
Yeah.
even though it's a dream,
Yeah.
right?
But no, you're right. It is weird.
It feels off, especially compared to the humor and almost the overriding uh like adultness of the movie. That just seems like a hair too far one way.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. It
So
is weird.
let me ask you, what is your favorite scene in the movie?
Whoa. Favorite scene? Oh man.
I mean, I can name mine if you want. Because mine is when they go get Slimer at the hotel.
I was gonna say, I think it's either Slimer or when they face the Stay Puft Man.
Oh, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I mean, as you said earlier, that scene for its effects is remarkable. It's like that opening shot of Star Wars where like the Star Destroyer comes in and you're just like, I mean, to me, that looks better than anything you see today.
Yeah.
Or like the Jurassic Park T-Rex scene. I'm like, I mean, I remember going and watching, I think it was like Peter Jackson's King Kong, like a decade later or something. And they had the Tyrannosaurus fight King Kong. And I'm like, Jurassic Park looks better. I don't know. It's a decade old now. And I was like, it looks, yeah, it looks better. Even though, they're also doing kind of like cartoon aesthetic and all that. I know I'm tangenting, but
we expect it on this show.
No, but I mean, like, as far as just the effects go for like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, I'm like, wow, it holds up really, really well.
Well, yeah. And then, I mean, again, from a story standpoint, right, we go back to that's the moment where Egon changes his mind and decides to cross streams finally.
Yeah. Which was great. I mean, that's one of those like movie tricks that a lot of movies do where you like plant this thing earlier just so you can raise the stakes because you don't know what happens. No one's done it.
Yeah.
They're like, is this going to work? He's like, I have no idea, but I can't think of anything else to do right now other than sending a huge energy blast into this portal.
Yeah.
So one other thing I wanted to ask you, and this is always kind of unique. What did you think of Gozer? Because I feel like they subverted expectations when Gozer shows up.
I think it was intentional, and they even kind of acknowledge it when they say like Gozer can take any form that it wants. Technically, it is kind of weird because, I mean, obviously now we've seen Gozer for what 30 something years, close to 40 years. And it's been that way. But thinking about it, it is really weird because, they climb the tower, we see the clouds and, there's earthquakes when they're at the bottom. We know as an audience what we're expecting from Gozer. And I think that initially we're expecting something more akin to this
like a giant demon or something,
like the more like the dog type creatures or something. And then it's just kind of like a woman with short hair.
White tights.
Yeah, you're like, okay. I mean, and I guess that's intentional to kind of throw us off, and that wasn't what we were expecting, and that's not what they're expecting.
It's interesting to me because they don't ever like really fight Gozer. They fire the beams at her, but like they don't hit her. They just kind of like go right through, and they're all like, well, shit.
No, and so then they just blow up the gate. That's what they do.
No, and like it's interesting because it all builds to this, and what they do really well up there is this kind of like aura of Gozer, right? The voice, that booming, creepy voice is like talking to them, and they're like, whoa, 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 we didn't say anything,
True.
And yet Gozer, the physical form of Gozer, really doesn't do a whole lot other than just like kind of be there.
True.
So again, I'm not saying anything about it. I think it works spectacularly well, but I'm not 100% sure how they pulled that off without it coming off as anticlimactic, because they didn't actually like fight her directly.
Well, I mean, it's
but
the same thing with the Stay Puft Man, right? Like, I think that we think about the Stay Puft Man as almost like the final boss, quote unquote, right? In video games terms. And again, essentially the Stay Puft Man walks down the street. Venkman makes some jokes about trying to, get him laid in New York. And then they decide to blow up the gateway. Like they don't even directly confront him anyway. And then this always I always wondered, right? After they do successfully destroy the gate, Stay Puft Man blows up, marshmallow crap flies all over New York.
Yeah.
2 questions. First of all, did you ever notice that Venkman has virtually no marshmallow on him and the other 3 are totally covered?
I did, and I assume that's just because he's the leading man.
That's what it's got to be, right? That it was more like a Bill Murray thing.
I don't know. It could be. I mean, I've never heard a story of this, but I also wouldn't put it past Bill Murray to be like, yeah, no. And they're like, well, we got to put like a little bit on your clothes. He's like, fine.
So, yeah, I don't know. That's something I always wonder about. And then my next question, and this is for you.
Yes.
If you were there and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man blew up, would you be tempted to eat some marshmallow?
I would.
I would too. And I don't know if that's like a bad thing because New York is filthy, but I think that every time I'm like, I mean,
I feel like the nature of marshmallows, right, being just plain white, you're like, I mean, I think if you like scoop some out, you're like, it looks good. Like if dirt was on it, we would know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'd probably have to, especially if I got covered in it. I'd probably be like, that's good.
I just think about that every time when I'm watching it. I'm like, yeah, I'd definitely eat like my body weight in marshmallow.
Yeah, fair enough. Also, I wanted to point this out. I don't know if this ever, like, I noticed this. Actually, this is weird. I noticed that I've seen this movie so many times, and because I was being critical of it, I never thought about it. But if you watch the beginning title sequence when it like shows the exterior of the library, and then it says Ghostbusters with the logo, it says Ghostbusters with Ghost and then Busters underneath it. It's stacked. Even though I think almost every time you ever see Ghostbusters, it's one long word.
Oh, you're right. I never thought about that. I don't have the name on my shirt. Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know. I just was watching it and I was like, I never gave it much thought, but it is a little different. Also, I have to say this scene just because I love it. Now we're just fanboying out, I think. But I love when they're walking in the library in the basement and they're just walking and like a bookshelf falls over and then Ray looks up and he looks at both of them and Venkman's like, first time. Like first time an entire bookshelf's ever fallen over next to you. The sarcasm is just,
I do have
symmetrical book stacking. He's like, you're right. No human being would ever stack books like this. It's so good.
I consider Ghostbusters to be essential Halloween viewing. And I know we're now past Halloween, but I watched it then. I want to know, why do you think the studio chose to release it, first of all, in June, and they're releasing Afterlife in November? It's almost like they're making a conscious effort not to make this be a Halloween film.
That could be. I know that Ghostbusters in '84 was, I believe it was the highest grossing movie of that year. If not, it's top 3. Mm-hmm. But I think they were positioning it at that point. Jaws and Star Wars had already solidified the summer blockbuster. And I don't think they wanted people to associate it with like horror, or I think they wanted them to see it as a blockbuster. Mm-hmm. And this is right around the time where like blockbusters were really starting to take over the summer, from about May till maybe August. So, school goes back, whenever that is. It's changed through the years. But yeah, essentially, I would guess that's why. Now, when you ask me why would they move Afterlife to November, I don't know if that had anything to do with the pandemic.
Well, if I recall, I thought Afterlife was again supposed to be released in the summer.
Yeah, it might have been. And again, they might have wanted it to be considered in that. Because unfortunately, whether we admit it or not, the fall block of movies is generally considered either an Oscar, film trying to make noise, or the movies that just weren't good enough to be summer blockbusters, or Halloween movies. Yeah, like actual Halloween movies. So I would assume they had initially wanted that. Like, for instance, I saw they dropped a trailer for the Batman, and I was watching another trailer on YouTube, and that one said that movie was coming out in 2021. Now it's coming out in March 2022. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But, I mean, whether the studio ever intended a Ghostbusters association with Halloween, I always watch it on Halloween.
I think most people do. I mean,
yeah, it's like one of my favorite themed movies for that time of year. So, but it worked. I think, the success and all of that. Ivan Reitman, was a great director. And I know with Afterlife, I believe it's his son, Jason Reitman.
Yep. Yeah.
So pretty cool, passing it down through the family. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that's going to be a theme in the movie.
If the trailer, the trailer is correct in any way. Last question before we kind of wrap up.
Sure.
I know you've seen it because I've watched it with you. Why do you think Ghostbusters 2 doesn't recapture the magic and the quotability and the just fun? I think that fun is the word that summarizes the Ghostbuster film best, in the same way that the first one does.
I think it's the spirit of it. There's something about the Ghostbusters being really down on their luck, but in a negative way, where in the first one, they sit on the steps at I think it's either NYU or one of the universities. And it's like, Venkman's like, call it luck, call it whatever. He's like, this is our destiny. Like, we're supposed to do this. When you get to the second one, him and Sigourney Weaver have broken up. Venkman and Barrett have broken up. She has a kid. It just doesn't feel like they're really the Ghostbusters for most of the movie, which they're not.
Yeah. And
it reminds me of like Dark Knight Rises. Now, if you've seen that movie, it's an instance of like where Bruce Wayne's no longer in his prime. And I think to the story's detriment.
Yeah.
I think it just, they take the Ghostbusters out of prime and they feel like they're older. I think Ray's running like a bookshop. They're going to kids' birthday parties and they're playing it off as jokes. I think Venkman wrote a book, but it doesn't feel like they're the Ghostbusters for most of the movie. And then by the time they get around to suiting up, it's just not quite the same. I think the first time they fire the proton packs is like in the courtroom. So if I had to guess, that's why. That guy in the painting was creepy as hell, though.
Oh, dude, totally.
I thought the slime scenes were great, like under the city. That was really intriguing. There's elements that work. I love the Statue of Liberty scene.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear that song, I think of that scene. So, and then the second thing is why it didn't stick is Ghostbusters 2 is by no means anywhere near as quotable. And if you're going to be a top tier memorable comedy, you got to be quotable. That's just, we went over it earlier.
Ghostbusters is quotable. Totally.
It is. It's unforgettable in that sense. And yeah, I don't think Ghostbusters 2 brings it to that level. And that might be just, hard to recapture the magic. Maybe the writing wasn't quite up there. But side note, and this is for you, because you and I went to film school. We went to college together. We acknowledged that earlier. They wrote Ghostbusters 2 at Martha's Vineyard in 2 weeks.
Jeez.
Or no, they wrote Ghostbusters 1 at Martha's Vineyard in 2 weeks.
I feel like that's a dig at me. You're telling me I should be cranking out screenplays in 2 weeks.
No. I'm just saying I think sometimes we underestimate our ability to do certain things. And if Ghostbusters proves anything, it's that we need to find that entrepreneurial spirit and go after it. Because damn it, we could save the world.
Or at least New York.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's a great segue to start wrapping up our show. So I'm going to ask you a question. I already know the answer to it. The audience already does too. But if I don't ask you, like, then this whole show falls apart and the semblance of a structure that we maintain is gone for good. So Ghostbusters, does it hold up or not?
110%. Yeah. It's a great movie. I'll show my kids. I mean, I don't care if they like it or not. They're going to sit there and watch it
every Halloween. No, I think you're right. I mean, there's a reason why we're still buying shirts, almost 40 years later.
Yep.
And
I've been a Ghostbuster for Halloween. I had a proton pack as a kid.
I think I still have a proton pack in a box somewhere.
It's amazing. Yeah. I always remember it had that yellow, it was like a plastic
piece of foam that you put in.
Yeah, and it like went in, but it popped off all the time.
Yeah, it was terrible.
Yeah, it was terrible.
And they were really long and they would break in half.
Yeah. They didn't really work all that well.
No, they weren't good. But yeah, I remember.
Well, I'll throw it over to the viewers while we wrap this up. Does Ghostbusters hold up for you? And listen, even if you hate the movie, I think you got to admit it does. But tell us your thoughts in the comments. I wanted to end on this because I've heard this a couple times. And I'm always curious to see what people think. And maybe you and I will do a discussion on this on the podcast at some point. But to our listeners, I would like to know, which movie do you like more? Back to the Future or Ghostbusters?
Ooh, interesting.
That is a tough pick right there. Because both those movies are amazing. And we haven't talked Back to the Future. So maybe we'll answer that question when we get around to Back to the Future.
Fair enough.
But be sure to continue the conversations on social media. You can find us at filmmakerscompasspodcast.com. All the links are there. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Spotify, and if you like the video version of the show, be sure to subscribe on YouTube. All right. CP, take us out.
Well, on that note, thanks for sticking around and fanboying with us this week. I'm not going to lie. I'm probably going to watch Ghostbusters as soon as this record is over. Just an FYI, everyone, because I need to see it again.
And I just watched it.
So on that note, thank you for sticking with us. We hope that you will keep watching movies and we'll see you next week.